Okay. Figuring things out. I might have to end. Okay, I think that's it. Well, whoever is right now in here, hope people will be joining in. I'm just checking how everything is working. Hopefully this time the video actually works. Contrary to what we had last time. So in this case, they'll be able to not only hear me, but see me as well, hopefully. So I've gathered, once again, it's another live stream that I decided to do as I receive some questions about the role of the Scrum Master, about Scrum, and I'm doing this live stream to answer some of those questions. So I've been gathering the questions from the comments, from the messages, all about different situations that a Scrum Master might face. And some of the interesting ones of how to help your product owner, how to work with your manager. So I will go through some of those that I already have and gathered, but if you have other questions, you are free to obviously ask them in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of jump into the questions. In the meantime, I'm not sure that this stream will be recorded at all, just to make sure that my video actually works, but I think it will still appear on the platforms, something that should still be available there. But either or, let me jump in and start looking into some of those questions that I received. So let me go back to my menu so that you can actually see the questions as I go through them. Okay, and by the way, if you're having trouble to hear me or see me, or the video is choppy, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to fix it. I'm still very new to all this streaming thing. Okay, so one of the questions that is often asked overall about the role of a Scrum Master is, can a Scrum Master work with multiple teams, or should there be one Scrum Master per team? Now, often when we talk about a Scrum team, we talk about the fact that for one product, we have one product owner, and the owner of the product who makes all the decisions around the product. When we talk about the Scrum Master, it looks like the Scrum Master is per team. So every team should have a Scrum Master. But if you look at the Scrum guide overall, we don't really see any rules around how many Scrum Masters you need for a different number of teams. For me, I think a Scrum Master can work with a couple of teams. That is absolutely normal, but it then depends on the teams themselves, right? You might have teams that are pretty mature. They already know Scrum. They don't really need a lot of coaching or teaching, right? They need someone to help them remove impediments, to help them in some specific situations. Then a Scrum Master can definitely support 2 teams like this, potentially even 3, though it might be more complicated. Now, if a team the Scrum Master is working with is pretty new, it can be pretty difficult to actually work with several teams at the same time, just because it just feels like you never have time for your team when they need you, and then when you join or when you're finally there, you kind of miss the opportunity to teach, to coach, or to help them resolve an issue. And I definitely felt like that when at some point in my career I was working with 3 teams. 3 teams was definitely not a way to go, definitely didn't work out for me, especially when one of the teams was working on a different product. However, when you are working with a few teams, working on the same product, I think it is possible. But then it's just up to you. Scrum Master is a full-time job. There are a lot of things that you need to do during the day, but there are also some things that you can do. You can kind of optimize and you can put together. For example, if you're running a training session, you can include both teams at the same time. So there are a lot of things like that that might be helpful when you're bringing people together. There you go. No specific rule around the Scrum Master and how many Scrum Masters you need for a number of teams. Double checking. What do you have in chat? Okay, so let me jump in the one in chat. So can you talk about your path to becoming PST and how long it took you to become a PST? Very great question. It is a long path. I actually have been invited to speak at the Scrum Day Bangalore where I talked about this as well. So I'm hoping to finally edit this video and post it on my channel. But right now, let me kind of cover this question here. When I initially decided that I want to go for the PST path, when I applied, I didn't actually have enough experience at the moment. And I needed to gather a bit more experience as well, first of all, as a Scrum Master, but also in some other, in other more specific skills and other more specific knowledge, such as training, for example. So it took me a year to get to a point where I thought, okay, I feel like I'm ready right now and I'm going to do it. So the first time I applied, then I waited a year. Then I finally applied. And from that point, it took me another year to actually finally get my PST. And during that year, it is a very long journey. I would say long, not in a way that it takes such a long time. It's not like it took me 5 years, but it's long just because it requires so much from you. You need to be ready to fail. Of course, fail some of the steps of the PST journey and redo them again and learn new things, accept criticism, and really work on yourself. So I think the first things that you do, I think all of those steps are written down on the scrum.org website. Not sure what the page is, but just to overall look at it, you first apply, talking about your experience, talking about your experience as a Scrum Master, your success stories, where did you bring the most value overall in your role, and then after that you have an interview. So this is the first interview where kind of it's an opportunity for you to show your knowledge of Scrum and to, well, first meet people who are working at scrum.org. Then you have the train the trainer event. So this is once you pass the previous step. So train the trainer event, this is where you come to learn from other trainers. And it's basically like a PSM class with an extra day where you work with other trainers or candidates to show how you train. Then you have, well, I think at some point between that and the end of it, I needed to talk more about a specific topic just because I felt, and obviously the Scrum.org felt that I wasn't pretty clear on some of the topics during the previous steps. So I needed to prepare a video on this topic once again, just to make sure that I am aligned. And I had, PSM 3, obviously. I already had PSM 1 and PSM 2. So I needed to pass PSM 3, PSM3, it's its own journey, I'd say, and a lot of people, I think, who are going through this journey can talk more about what it entails and how much work it really requires from you. I did have to pass it only twice. So the first one I did pass the PSM3, but there are requirements around the level, well, basically the mark that you get. So I needed to pass it again to get to exactly the mark that I wanted, so which was 95% at the time. And then you have a peer review. And peer review, I also had to pass twice. So as I said, it really is a journey where you need to be ready for failure. You need to be ready to learn basically on a day-to-day basis. And as I like to say, you kind of need to be a Scrum geek in a way to really, I guess, get to the point of a PhD and really enjoy this journey. I hope that 90% now, yeah, I can see that you say when I was doing it was still 95. So I would have to pass it anyway. I think my first one was 89 or 88, something like that. But yeah, definitely some additional work on the PSM. Scrum geek. Yeah, that's a good term. Okay. So what other questions do we have? I will be looking at the chat for now. How does a Scrum Master deal with global teams who are working on the same product but on different instances, which may cause the product backlog goal to not be aligned because of geographical needs? Okay, that's an interesting one. So you have one product but different, I guess, it depends on where it is geographically. Say it's a local website in the US and maybe another type of the same website but localized in another country. That's kind of what I would, how would I interpret that? So if it's not how it works, let me know in the comments. I think always the first thing to make sure you understand is whether you have one product or multiple products, right? So maybe this is a case where you have more of a product line that includes several products. So you would need to set up some of the high-level agreements, such as the definition of done. Because people are working on the same product line, I'm pretty sure that this is where a common baseline definition of done would be helpful, so that any team working on it would always deliver the same quality, just because they are linked to each other. So that would be a good way to look into it. I would also do more of a product definition discussion with whoever is involved, and define the boundaries, as I call it, your product boundaries. So if you have two different teams, what are the boundaries? What do they actually both work on, right? Do they own the same part of the product or not? So that's kind of where you can identify, well, this team mostly touches or owns this part of our product, while this other team owns this other part of the product. If you feel that there are several products in the end, then obviously you'll have different product goals. On the other way, I'm more thinking if you have one product, and I'm wondering where your product goals would not be aligned. Maybe your product goals are a little bit too specific. So sometimes we might have product goals that are too aligned with the kind of features we want to do. Say we want to deliver a specific functionality on this website, or website on this type of product and this side of product, and then a completely different thing on another one. So it feels like, well, we have two completely different product goals. But are those really good goals to use? Maybe it's better to look into what are we trying to achieve, what is the outcome that we're trying to gain with implementation of those different features. It might be more specific to our customers and the value to the company. So the product goal might be increase our number of customers or increase the percentage of active customers, rather than saying we're going to implement this specific feature in this location and a different feature in another location. So maybe this is where you're missing alignment on what are the higher goals of the organization and how do they trickle down into those products. That was a very lengthy explanation. I hope that answered the question and gave you some ideas of how to approach it and what are some of the things that you can do, right? To bring a little bit more clarity in this situation. Okay, yeah, the analytics. Debbie, I have your question. I know that you asked it in the community. So can you share two questions about the analytics, the ones that you asked? So what is the best way to track report analytics for the team, and what is the best way to track report analytics for management? So I assume analytics, what you mean is different metrics, right? Something that we can measure our progress, and which ones would be the most important. As I always say, the agile metrics is a very complicated topic. There are so many things that you can really measure, so many things that you can collect. What I usually say is, Yes. Okay. What I usually say is you should first of all look at what you're trying to achieve with a specific metric. For example, why do you want to implement a metric like velocity, right? Why do you want to implement metric like team happiness? Often we kind of put those metrics on the team just because those are very widely used. Almost every team uses them. But maybe they're more of an overkill and you don't really need them. So usually I would first look at what do I want to achieve with a metric? Is there an actual challenge or problem that I want to bring visibility to? And in this case, I should find the metric that can help me do that. So it's all about creating transparency around a specific topic. For example, when I was working with the team that was constantly interrupted by their customers or other teams, and they could never really achieve their sprint goal, well, what I started to implement is a metric calculating how many interruptions happened during the sprint, because I wanted to really focus on this problem and help the team resolve it. And that was also a good metric to show to the management, because it's very specific and it highlights the problem where I need their help. Just looking into the chat just to make sure that I'm not missing any clarifications. So I would look at those in this way, as try to identify the problem. Why do you want to use a specific metric? And don't overcomplicate metrics, really. Don't implement 10 different metrics that maybe no one really cares about, and you don't look back at them and you don't really track them. Instead, implement one that is really good and that allows you to create transparency. Then is there a difference, I guess, between the metrics that you would track for the team and for the management? There might be. As I said in the example that I give, well, that was a metric that was mostly for the management rather than the teams. The teams, well, they were obviously interested in knowing how many of those interruptions were happening, but they didn't really need this visibility. They already had, they already were living this. So they didn't really need to be proven that there is a problem in this situation. But management, this is where we wanted to bring visibility. So there might be things that you want to track for your team just because you want to bring awareness to certain things, right? If you feel that maybe you feel that your team, well, that's an easy example. You feel that your team maybe doesn't have a very good definition of done for the product, or they're kind of slacking off a little bit on testing. What you can start collecting is metrics around defects, right? How many things do we find out? How many times do we break the build? How many times do we have a merge conflict, right? So this can be a metric that can be useful for the team just to bring awareness, because sometimes just because you said so is not enough, right? Sometimes you just need a little bit more data to kind of prove your point. So yeah, those are some of the things. But I have so many videos on the website talking about metrics, just because there's so many things that you can do, and I think you can find a lot of those ideas of what you can implement for the team and for management on my website. So I'm gonna send you there if you want to learn a little bit more. Okay, you're welcome. Where's the next one? Okay, how does a Scrum Master help product owners who are from different geographies, South Africa and UK, using the same product but are on different instances? Okay, I see we're really digging deeper into the situation. So you have multiple POs. You have multiple POs, but as we said, do you have multiple products, right? That's a good question to work on. I guess my question would be back to you: what is the problem that you're trying to solve for them? What do you want to help them with? Is it creating more alignment? Or are they struggling maybe with stakeholder management or something else? So if you can give me a little bit more information, that would be helpful. As I said, the best answer to questions like this is it depends. Same as with metrics. Okay, great. Well, you've already answered, that's great. Okay, question about product backlog. We're using JIRA for product backlog. What's your recommended tool for product backlog? I like JIRA, I'm not gonna lie, but it's because I've been using it for years. I know it really well, but I would say that it doesn't really matter what tool you use as long as it serves the purpose you're trying to achieve. I find JIRA pretty complicated for people who have never used it. With one of the teams I'm working with, it actually added a lot of complexity to our work just because the team never used the tool. We were very new to each other, to the product and to agility. And now we also had JIRA, right? So it complicated things because it's not that intuitive for people coming in. Like if you can compare starting to use JIRA if you've never used it compared to starting to use Trello if you've never used it, well, Trello is going to be very easy, but it doesn't have all functionality that you would like it to have. I would say maybe stay away from Excel files just because it makes it more difficult to order your product backlog. What I often see with teams who are using Excel files, well, kind of a list or a document or not for their product backlog management, they tend to just highlight items as with priority, like this is the highest priority, this is the medium priority, but it doesn't allow them to order the product backlog. So I would say find a tool that allows you to easily add items to the product backlog and add details to them, but also order them. So I think this is where it would be helpful. So I think there are so many tools right now that you can use. There is Azure DevOps, I think. I used it a little bit, so I don't really know it. I feel that it's also would be important that, honestly, everyone in the organization, or at least working on this product, uses the same tool. And I don't mean only the teams. I also mean that your stakeholders know how to use it, your product owner knows how to use it, and anyone who needs any information about where the product is can use the tool. So this is where you don't want the tool to become an impediment, I'd say. Remember, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This is kind of the more coming into the tools discussion. So just make sure that it doesn't prevent your individuals and interactions. Oh, okay, I want to help them with prioritization. Okay, so that's, I think I had this question as well about the prioritization overall. Okay, so if they work off the same product backlog, then I would say you need to have one product owner who makes decisions, right? The other product owner, if you say, okay, we have one product backlog in this case, it means that all the work needs to be prioritized in the same list. It doesn't matter which team is going to work on it. And if this is the case, then you do need to have one decision maker in this case. And that will help more with prioritization. Just because when you have multiple product owners, they might be having trouble prioritizing between the goals that they have in mind. Right? So if you have one product backlog, you need to make a decision, I'd say, who has the final say. In way how to prioritize, there are a lot of different things that you can use. There are a lot of different practices. Things like, what is it called? 2020 vision. I think that's how it's called, but it doesn't matter how it's called. Basically, this is a way for not only the product owners to prioritize, but actually involve stakeholders in this discussion, where you have all of your items in the product backlog, and then you draw a line and you say you can only put 20 items above this line. So which ones are the most important? So this opens up the discussion between the product owners and the stakeholders. So you put the 20 items there, then you draw a line again, and you say, well, now you can only put 10 above the line. Which ones are the most important? So this allows you to create this, order really very clearly around the product backlog, because people might not even know why some things are important for them until they get into that discussion, right? One stakeholder might believe that one particular feature is the most important because maybe of a date, right? Or maybe of some promises made. So that can open up some of those discussions to how can we be more aligned on our goals to make sure that we're working on what's the most valuable. You can also do planning poker for value, which is obviously, it's a value, estimated value. No, it's not really value that we are sure, we surely know is actually the highest value, but it's more of how you feel about a certain feature, right? That can be something to use, especially if you have like multiple stakeholders, multiple people working on this prioritization. What else you can do? Yeah, I think often I really like the other one that is called Moscow, pretty popular one. The method for prioritization. I find it a good start. And Moscow is basically a very easy practice where you look at your whole product backlog and then you tag each and every item with must have, should have, could have, and won't have. So you have 4. Must-haves are absolutely needed, so you will automatically prioritize them at the very top. So usually that would be, for example, if you're working on a specific release and you're trying to get to a point, say, to MVP, right? So we're trying to get to this MVP. What are the must-have features, right? If you're creating a product, what features do we have to have for it to be even usable by clients, right? So that can be must-haves. Should-haves, it's more of, well, if we have time, well, definitely should add this. And then could-haves, this is kind of like a wish list. Could-haves go at the bottom, and it's like, yeah, those are good things. I would love to work on them, but if we don't have time, we're not going to work on them. And then the last one would be won't have, and you need to do a very radical thing for all the items that are marked as won't have. You need to delete them or archive them so that they no longer appear in your product backlog, so that it doesn't kind of create more confusion around what's important. Another easy practice that can be helpful as well. This is usually very helpful when you start on the product, or you're kind of starting to create this product backlog for the team. You're not really sure what the highest priority is, how to define value, and that can be a way to help product owners and stakeholders come together. Okay, so let me see. I see some additional questions. Oh, Azure DevOps is kind of more complicated than JIRA. Well, I don't really know. Once again, I didn't really check too much how Azure DevOps works. Are you familiar with mobbing or ensemble programming? It seems like something a Scrum Master would encourage, or at least support and experiment. What is about Scrum Master's ongoing role with mobbing? So familiar with mobbing, what I understand from this is that it's like pair programming, but with more people, right? So there are more people actually working together on this. Mostly worked with pair programming, to be honest. And the way I would approach it in the Scrum Master role is, first of all, talk about it as a good practice that it has proven to be very effective in the long run, and just actually teaching people some of the key concepts of the practice, right? And then sometimes we would talk about that in a retrospective, and we would actually set some goals and action items related to this, as an experiment or a practice where we'd say we want to have at least two developers to pair program during the next sprint, right? So it can be the same way where you're trying to set those goals to run an experiment and see if it helps. We were doing a lot of that when we were working with a very complex product that included so many different pieces, where we run a survey to understand how comfortable different people are with different parts of the product. And we understood that there are some parts of the product that were complex and people were just not comfortable to touch them at all. And then you would have one person who would always do the work on this particular part. So that was a huge risk. And we needed to help others to get to a point where they would be able to work on that part of the product. And this is where we used things like pair programming or mobbing, where the person who is the expert on this part would be working on something related to this part of the product, and then two one or two other people just kind of come to work with him on this item. Or sometimes we would actually do complete reverse, where a person who've never worked with this item would start working on it, and when they need help, they would bring in the expert. So that can be very useful. And another case where I found it important to actually have something like this is when you have someone who is willing to learn something new, but so far, just because their skills are in a specific area, they tend to always get the same thing. So just because they know how to do it, and they never get a chance to learn something new that maybe other team members are working on. So you can also do something like that with pair programming and mobbing, where people who want to learn a certain skill, they take on the task that they're maybe not fully comfortable with or don't have full skill set for yet, and they pair up with people who do. And that kind of allows you to create a learning process. Now, yeah, the Scrum Master's role in this is more of bringing in positive practices that might be helpful for the team and allowing the team to decide if they want to implement them. Just making sure they know what it is. Okay. How do you create awareness for leadership management that are creating, causing an unhealthy environment? No psychological safety, no healthy failure culture if they don't want to be coached. That's a hard one. I'm going to be honest. If people don't want to be coached, you can't coach them, unfortunately. It's kind of like going to a therapist. If you don't think you need to go there, even if you do, it's not going to be very helpful. And it's the same way with coaching and having a coach. It's more of trying to understand them at this point. Why are they causing this unhealthy environment? There's got to be a reason. As I always say, no one wakes up, apart from maybe very, very few people, no one wakes up in the morning and says, how can I create an unhealthy environment at work today? Who can I insult, right? No one really wakes up with this thought, as I said, apart from maybe very, very few people. So it's more of understanding why it is created, right? How can you help them maybe to overcome some of those challenges they are facing right now? Sometimes people, especially in management positions, might not know what their role is in this new agile environment. And that might be the reason why they cause extra stress to the team, maybe being more of a micromanager. So instead of immediately trying to coach them, instead trying to understand what are they really living, what kind of challenges do they have, and go in and say, how can I help you first, right? How can I help you right now in whatever you're facing? And then once you created the better relationship and created an environment of trust, you can address things like how they create the rest of the environment around them, right? But as we say, if we're going through a big transformation, agile transformation, some people might need to be left behind, not because they're bad, but just because this new agile way of working is just not for them. Just more of making sure that people are aware of maybe where the organization is going, what kind of environment you're trying to create, and asking them, well, do you want to be on board with that? Because if yes, we need to make some changes, right? And if no, why are we why are we even trying? Why are we even trying? Why are we, pushing something on people if they don't want to be there? That's another way of looking at that. Okay. Oh, so many. Oh, sorry. Goodbye. I don't know if you're still there. Just saw the question, the message there. Okay, so let me go back to some other questions. Still have some time. I have completed my PSM1. How can I start getting Scrum experience? I'm just starting this career journey. Yeah, that's a very popular question these days. A lot of people reach out to me. I often say that the best way is just to start where you are. So if you are, that's kind of the same way that how I started. So I passed my PSM1. Our company was going through kind of an agile transformation, but not all of the departments. Our department definitely was not going through that. But I was very interested in the Scrum Master role, so I passed the exam. And then I went back to my manager and said, how can I implement all of this knowledge in our team now? And this is where I started to just getting that experience by doing things like organizing retrospectives and getting better at facilitating discussions, or just kind of implementing some of those processes. As I say, that was when I learned how not to do Scrum, but it was still my first Scrum experience because I didn't really have a mentor to help me. So that can be, talking about mentors, obviously a way to get some of that experience. So if you are, if you have a community and there may be potential opportunities to jump in, and some people, some mentors or PSTs would be more open to sometimes hire someone who doesn't have the experience, but is very passionate about the role, right? Because they are willing to grow that person. And we had someone like that in our organization that I worked with a couple of years ago, who was working in completely different in a completely different position, and she was very interested in the Scrum Master role. So she started to reach out to people who were in the Scrum Master role and asking, "Can I, join you in those events? Can I shadow you?" And through that, she was able to get that experience by, first of all, attending those events with us, but then also slowly trying to do that on her own with her teams. And then we had more of kind of a program internally where we placed her in a team for 6 months to see how it goes after that initial period, And then she was able to take over the Scrum Master role. So that was also a way to go. Depends on where you work and what resources, I guess, that are available to you. Okay. That helps. Another one. Oh, Mahal, you have so many questions. That's great. That's awesome. How does sprint forecasting work? If you're using velocity, so if you're using estimations, whether it's story points estimations or if you're counting the number of PBIs. I'm just reading through some of those messages, and I'm getting distracted just because I'm looking through those messages. So if you're using estimation, the way you can use it is looking back at your velocity from previous sprints, and then when you plan your next sprint, you kind of use that velocity as your guideline. Say if you overall complete around 30 items or 30 story points in a sprint, then you're not going to take 70 in the next one, right? Because you know that your average velocity is about 30. But that can be a way to do that. Other way to do that, it's more by kind of a feeling, if you're not really doing estimations, or sometimes overall that can be something to ask the team in the end. Look at this list of things that we want to do this sprint. Do you feel that it is doable? Do you feel that you will be able to achieve this, right? Is it aligned with our sprint goal? So all of those questions that you can ask the team. And sometimes it's important to ask that question because people don't have that high level view. Sometimes they forget to look at the whole thing and try to analyze, well, will I be able to actually do that? I only have one sprint. Obviously, talking about things like capacity, right? If someone's on vacation, obviously don't take work maybe that they are more likely to do, or don't take more work while they're not there. So vacation, days off, things like that, definitely to talk about. Any other constraints that might be put on the team. Maybe there is an event, people need to prepare a presentation for, say, a town hall or something. All of those things you need to take into account. And of course, in sprint, we know that the sprint contains all of the events. You need to account for that so that your team doesn't feel rushed when they need to have a backlog refinement or they want to have a retrospective, right? So they don't feel rushed. You need to make sure that you remember, well, we have a sprint planning, we have dailies every day, we have review and retrospective. Those are part of our sprint, right? So we need to always include them in our calculations, I'd say, as we think about our forecast for the next sprint. Okay. Yeah, beautiful name, right? Mina Mahali is a beautiful name. So thank you for advice, Daria. Yes, of course, I'm always happy to share my experiences. I know that the Scrum Master role can be a challenge sometimes, but it's always good to reach out to other people who are in the same position or who are playing the same role, and that really what helps you also grow. Okay, this one, the other one. What's the best way to break up a feature into user stories for analysis, development, and testing? I think if you look up the spider, and it's called like this. I'm gonna put it in the chat if I can. Yeah, if you are looking up for that, I think it's Mike Cohen that created this little chart that gives you some ideas of how to break it up, different items in your product backlog into smaller pieces. But to highlight what you wrote, right? Stories for analysis, development, and testing. Every story or product backlog item, because not everything should be a story. Every product backlog item needs to include all of the steps to get to done. So if your definition of done includes analysis, development, and testing, each and every product backlog item should include all three. Because if you just did the development but didn't test it, is it really done? So instead of slicing it, instead of slicing it like horizontally, we have analysis, we finished analysis, then we do development, and then we do testing. Instead, we're trying to slice it vertically into smaller pieces. So what is the smallest maybe thing that the team can work on to get it to done, right? To fully tested it, if we're doing documentation, to document it, so that we can actually show something that is working and usable to our stakeholders in the sprint review. Because otherwise, we just have kind of a slice of a thing, but not the actual thing. Think of it of, say, you're going to a restaurant and you're ordering your food, you're ordering a little salad on the side, then you order your main dish, and then you have dessert, right? So if the chef, instead of working on the salad and then sending you the salad, then working on the dish and sending you the dish, instead does all of the three of them at the same time, well, you will be hungry for a really long time because you will be waiting for all the three things to be done, right? Otherwise, there's nothing that the chef can send to you. Maybe he just prepared all the ingredients. Now everything is cut, everything is ready, but you still don't have your meal. So instead, that is how you should be breaking up a feature more in the full functionality that you can analyze, develop, test, document, whatever you need to do to get it done. Okay. Oh, yeah, I can see, yeah, maybe a spike can be a right option. It depends on how much analysis, I'd say, you need to do. If you usually how I talk about spikes is if your team has absolutely no idea how to implement something and they need to do some additional research into potential solutions, then you might need a spike or kind of a research product backlog item before you actually create your full product backlog item with acceptance criteria and understanding of potential approaches. If your team kind of has some ideas of what potential approaches they can use, but they are not sure 100%, this is still part of the story, right? As we start working on this item, we will learn more, we will understand how to do it better, and we'll be able to get it to done. Because I've seen a lot of, not a lot of teams, but I've seen some teams who kind of go onto the spike route and they have a spike for every single user story in their backlog just because they are not sure of what approach to take. But the reality is you can never be sure. We work in a complex environment. We always will have some uncertainties. We'll always have some risk. So we just need to account for it when we estimate the work. It's not only about the effort it takes to implement something, but also about this uncertainty that we might have. And obviously for bigger things, you might need a spike, right? Say researching a new system or a new technology that we've never used before, that can be a great way to use a spike. So yeah, thank you, Ganesh, for this. Okay, what? Oh, I think I have another one. Another question there. It might be the last one I'm going to take. Maybe not. Let me answer this and then we'll see. What do you think about one single person being the Scrum Master of multiple teams, synergy or antipattern? So this is, I think I answered it at the very beginning, but let me kind of quickly recap what I talked about. It is okay for a Scrum Master. How to say? There is no rule in Scrum that tells you that a Scrum Master is one per team. Well, one Scrum Master, one team. But it might add additional complexities for a Scrum Master, especially if the two teams are working on completely different products, if they are on different levels of maturity as teams. So one that is very new, for example, and another one that already knows and runs Scrum. So those things may complicate the Scrum Master's role, just because most likely you will not be able to be there when the team really needs you, right? Especially multiple teams. When we talk about two, I'm kind of, yeah, that's definitely possible. I've done it. When we talk about three, I've done it. I didn't like it because I felt that I was letting everyone down. I was never there when the team really needed me, and I was just finding out things at the end of the day of what happened with the other team, and I wasn't there. So I'd say it really depends on the situation, how much help your team needs. There are some synergies that you can find if you are working with teams on the same product, because first of all, they will be working off of the same product backlog, so you will be able to coach them together. At the same time, teams that are maybe on the same level of agile maturity can also create some synergies. If you're doing some training, for example, you can kind of have both of the teams be there and learn at the same time, right? So that can be some synergy that you can find. Okay. Another question from Abhishek. This will be the last one. So if you have additional questions, you can put them in the chat, and I'll just add it into my next live that I will be doing next in the next month. Okay, so how the actions of product owner and developers could contribute to reduce transparency. Well, if the product owner owns the product backlog, right? So the product backlog, if it's not clear to everyone, that is the role of the product owner, is to make sure that that everybody understands the product backlog, that they know what different items in the product backlog mean. And if the product owner is not really doing a good product backlog management, that might reduce transparency, obviously, because people won't be able to understand what is there, what are the next goals, and what are we working on, what brings the most value. That reduces transparency. Developers, the same way, I guess, if they are not communicating proactively, both the product owner and developers, if they are not communicating with each other on a regular basis, if developers work on something that is not in the product backlog and don't talk to the product owner, that is going to reduce transparency. So it's more about really having that communication channel open if you want to have a better transparency around what the team is working on, what brings the most value, what is the current state of the product backlog, right? Now it comes back to communication and good product backlog management as well. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I don't see any other questions here, and we only have a few minutes left because I wanted to finish by 4. But just wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming in and asking questions. I think I had some tough ones there, so some good questions as well. And I really hope that the answers are helpful and that we're able to gain some insight, find maybe new action items for yourself, some things to try and experiment with. But I hope to see you in the next one. As you know, if you're interested in more materials on Scrum Master, the website, you can find so much more. My blog posts, videos, of course, and different materials that you can download. I right now encourage everyone to join my 7-day Scrum Master Challenge, or Action Week, as I call it, to help you create a bit more learning around your role and kind of grow and try out new things. So it's also a free email course that you can sign up for on the website. And if you're not yet part of the community, the Mastering Scrum community, I would always encourage everyone to come in. It's at masteringscrum.mn.co. I'm going to put it in the chat. So I would love to see you there. We have many people there asking questions, answering questions. I'm there also on a regular basis, looking up what is happening and answering some questions as we go through the feed in our community. If you're interested, I'd love to see you there, so you can join on the link. Apart from that, I will be seeing you next time. I will be soon sharing another video, as always. We'll be sharing 1 video a month, another blog post also in the month of September. So more things to come And I hope that that was helpful. Hope to see you again in the next ones. Thank you, everyone. This is the link to the community. Mastering Scrum. Okay. Great. Okay, well, signing out.